We are officially starting with round 10. So we start things off with Heimdall as we usually do, with this awesome shot of the landscape with the moon in the background, Kyoto City, Japan in the Edo period. And they've actually reinforced the walls on the arena because of last round. You remember the arrows started getting deflected into the crowd, etc, etc. The crowd's been damaged a couple times, so they're taking precautionary measures, which I actually kind of like. But if you're a Record of Ragnarok fan and don't want to miss any of the news, any of the updates, make sure you're subscribed to this channel as I cover the chapters every single month with a bunch of other content as well. Heimdall says, taking account into the lessons learned after the 9th round where a large number of spectators were injured, the arena is finally completed with special modifications. As requested by the fighter on the god side, the stage for the 10th round is a perfect recreation of a portion of Kyoto City, Japan. This place is detailed as hell and it looks really awesome. One of the best arenas, of course. The crowd is reacting, they're saying this was a request from a god. Why the hell is he putting it in the humans' favor? Heimdall says the gods have 5 wins and 4 losses. The countdown to the extinction of humanity is only at 2, because don't forget, it doesn't have to go all the rounds, they just have to reach 7. Humanity is literally at the edge of the cliff right now, and to push them off this cliff, the greatest sword god in the heavens has descended here. Another moonlight shot with Susanoo walking across the bridge with a smirk on his face. Looks great. We got to see Hilda and Gold watching from the stands, with just more shots of Edo City, Japan with this awesome bell that actually gets rung when the match starts later on. So as I was talking about in my spoiler video, I said I think that this is one of the murals that was similar to Raiden and Shiva's match, and it is. That says, in ancient times, this god struck down the 8-headed serpent Yamata no Orochi with this Totsuka no Tsurugi, the sword of the 10 handrets. I don't know if that's supposed to say 10 hundredths or what that's supposed to say. Somebody can let me know. Kenjutsu, that means swordsmanship at this moment, was born in this world. So they're referencing Susanoo as the god of swords, the god of kenjutsu, which is working as a word for swordsmanship. Keep that in mind. We get this awesome mural, as I mentioned, with Susanoo cutting the head off the Hydra. Epic shots. I kind of wish this was not a mural. I kind of wish we actually got to see it, but who knows why they didn't do that. And then the sword was born from Orochi's tail, a legendary sacred treasure. Ame no Marakumo no Tsurugi, the heavenly sword of gathering clouds. With that sword in his hands, he was furious like a storm, swift like lightning. He cut down the evil gods of Takamagahara, the high plane of heaven. He is the sword god, feared as the wild god, and now it is time for him to live up to his reputation. I am the origin of kenjutsu, the strongest god slayer, Susanoo no Mikoto. If you guys did not know, Susanoo is known as the storm god, so they classify he was called a storm. He was swift as lightning because he's not going to use any of those supernatural abilities, I'm assuming. So they're saying, they're referencing him being the storm god without him actually being the storm god in this. We see Susanoo walk over to this alleyway. We see him staring down it, moon in the background, and he says, this is the Bakumatsu. Takes in a deep, long breath and says, I am hyped. Just as he says that, in the background, walking down the opposing side of the alleyway, we get to see his challenger. Mankind's challenger to the strongest god slayer in the heavens, says Heimdall, is this man as Okita Tsuji makes his appearance. He walks in with aura all around him. Ambiance on point. There was an era in Japanese history when the men were intense and overflowing with fighting spirit. Swords and ideas clashed, and many lives were lost on that place. It was Kyoto, at the end of the Edo period. In this city where countless swordsmen and masters were born, the peak of kenjutsu was reached, the art of manslaying. Who is the strongest manslayer of that era? Would it be him who was Japan's #1 small sword and created many unruly ronin? Sasaki from Imawa Regumi? No. Would it be him who was called the strongest tyrant of the end of the Edo period and who mastered the Shinto Munin Ryu? The founder and leader of the Shinsengumi, the director Serizawa Kamo? No. Then would it be the 4 manslayers of the Bakumatsu who turned said era with their killing swords? Okada Izo, Tanaka Shinbei, Kawakami Gensai, and Nakamura Hanjiro? No, it was the small man dressed in a light blue checkered Hiyori. He was feared by warriors as a demon. The sword dyed Kyoto and Osaka in fear and blood during the Bakumatsu era. His true identity. Is he a human? Is he a demon? History's strongest manslayer. He is called Okita Tsuji. So a lot that I just covered there. The Sasaki I mentioned is not the Sasaki we know. It's a different name, but I couldn't pronounce his other name. A lot of these names are tough to pronounce. But yes, they're using this verbiage calling him the strongest manslayer. They even say of that era. And although they call it Susanoo the god of swords, they are being very careful in not calling Okita the strongest swordsman. So I do think that that is for the Sasuke reasons. I've raised questions about this in my other videos because in my heart of hearts, I don't believe Okita is going to surpass Sasuke, but we shall see. Don't forget, Sasuke wasn't a manslayer in Record of Ragnarok, as he didn't actually kill his opponents. He never actually wanted to win. He's the greatest loser, so he always would lose to his opponents and then surpass them after the fight, then go find a new stronger opponent. Now that being said, we actually get a shot, as Okita is being mentioned, of his weapons. He's got 2 katanas, not just one. The captain of the first unit of the Shinsengumi, Okita Tsuji, and we get that same montage that we got with Susanoo. Looks awesome with this cold ass face-off panel with the moonlight in the background. Okita says, I miss this town a lot. Even the blood smells the same. Man's a savage. The strongest manslayer in human history and the heaven's greatest godslayer. Between those two, who is stronger? Now we find out, says Heimdall, and he slams the gong. The bell rings around the city, and right as it does, Okita's getting ready to fight. He's got his sword drawn, but Susanoo looks over to the side. Doesn't even have his attention on Okita. Okita's surprised by this. He starts sweating. He's like, what the hell's going on? Susanoo says, so, you are Okita Tsuji then? Okita's like, huh? I mean, yeah. Susanoo says, that's store. That's Ikadaya, right? Okita says, true, you are right. Susanoo then rushes over, which looks like this was that demon mode panel we saw, but he wasn't actually going to attack Okita. He ran over to the side of the wall, and he says, I see this is Ikadaya, where the Shinsengumi, with only 4 men, cut their way to victory against over 20 members of the Chosu and Tosa loyalist samurai. The one and only Ikadaya. Ooh, I can see the sword marks on the pillars. The aftermath of Ikadaya incident has been faithfully recreated. He's pleased. He requested this, down to the last detail. Okita says, you really know a lot about this, don't you? Susanoo says, sure I do. The Bakumatsu period was my one and only dreamland. Okita says, this place, is it somewhat dear to you? Well, I would assume it's dear to him if he says it was his dreamland. Susanoo says, yeah, the sword I created was cultivated by mankind over a long period of history. And in the Bakumatsu period, they mastered the art of manslaying. That's why I've been waiting for so long. It was for you, the strongest manslayer of the Bakumatsu period, Okita Tsuji. So out of all the swordsmen, it seems, the manslayers that they're using, Susanoo views Okita as the strongest, as the most worthy to fight him. That's why he wanted to fight him. He says, this time I will fight you with one of the best panels of the chapter. Susanoo's eyes went white. He looks like a straight demon. Okita says, this is not what I was expecting from the god of swords. We get a pan out shot to Okita's comrades, brothers in arms in the Shinsengumi, and they're sighing. They're like, Tsuji, wake the fuck up. Give me a break. That guy gets distracted so easily, says one of them. Please stop your loud, stupid voice. It's embarrassing the squad, says another. A third says, Cuckoo, you didn't change at all. Still the same Shinpachi who's always so serious. Come again? Hajime, you little shit. Do you want to fight? Bring it on. And then as these guys are squabbling, Big Dog Kamo, the man that's usually flanking Okita, like punches him on the head. He's like, cut that shit out. You're gonna punch me even in the afterlife, says Hajime. Kondo says, I don't care where it is. And as Okita hears his guys in their normal form, he has a sigh of relief and a smirk crosses his face. He says, they're a noisy bunch of fellows, as always. We cut back, and Kondo's got all his men in order. He says, are you guys ready? We, the Shinsengumi, will go along with Tsuji. And we get this awesome shot of the major players in the Shinsengumi, the captains. They look badass, as I've talked about in my spoiler video. Hajime says, finally. Shinpachi says, but is Tsuji's body fit to fight him? Kondo replies, fear not. Besides, take a look at his face. And all these other members agree. They're all in agreement. They look at Okita's face and they know, without a shadow of a doubt, at times like this, Tsuji is stronger than anyone else. A healthy body, the nostalgic air, and the strongest opponent. That's badass. Great hype for all of them. No one can beat Tsuji. They called Susanoo the strongest opponent. His guys are in such reverence of Tsuji. And that is actually going to be the final panel. We see Susanoo with a smile on his face, wide as hell. And Okita with a great smile on his face as well, says, finally, I can fight to the death with all my heart. With that being said, if you like the Record of Ragnarok content on the channel, hit that subscribe button for me. It really helps out the channel, pushes the video out to more people, especially if you guys like it as well. I appreciate all the support. Thanks. But chapter starts off right where we left off, with the face-off in the alleyway. Okita is the first one to make a move. He goes after him, and the gods side of the crowd are saying, that human's eyes, they are red, right? They're scaring the hell out of me. Okita's boys say he seems to be going all out from the start. It's been a while since we've seen Tsuji fight to the death without that disease, his tuberculosis. That's right, I'm getting so hyped, I'm getting goosebumps. Other humans are saying, that little dude's humanity's strongest manslayer? Not gonna lie, he looks like a kid to me. And when Kondo hears that, he just chuckles under his breath and thinks to himself, show them, Tsuji. Show them why you, Okita Tsuji, are truly the best. The strongest swordsman of the Bakumatsu, and the reason why so many fear your name. Now notice how it says the strongest swordsman of the Bakumatsu, and they keep calling him the strongest manslayer. Sasuke not a manslayer, not from the Bakumatsu, just saying. We move forward, Okita lunges at Susanoo, who stays stationary. We finally get a shot of Ares, Zeus, and Hermes. They're all watching from their spot, but don't forget it got destroyed, so they're sitting on this like little carpet rug, just watching on the monitors. Ares says he's underestimating that godly opponent too much. This will end in an instant, so of course he's known for being wrong. As Okita is rushing towards Susanoo, he goes invisible. If you guys watched my video on the lore and backstory of Okita Tsuji from his prequel, you'll know this technique, his Kami speed technique where he can go invisible. He goes invisible, and Susanoo is a little bit shocked. At the last second, Susanoo perceives Okita's movement and dodges out of the way of the attack, and then Okita swings again, and Susanoo barely gets out of the way. Okita doesn't let up for an instant, goes invisible again, jumps at Susanoo. This time Susanoo has to block. Susanoo says, "Nice one." He's smiling ear to ear as he blocks, and Okita stares into his soul. This is one of the craziest, I'm telling you, this fight is fucking amazing, because there's not even that much talking in the interactions. Okita is straight up on demon time, and he reminds me of like a fucking puma, a panther, like a straight up jungle cat that's just like on the prowl, bro. I swear. Susanoo says, "You're faster than I assumed you'd be. You're so rough, I didn't even have time to pull out my sword," because don't forget, his sword is underneath the wrapping, the seat. He pushes Okita back off him, gets him away from him. He tries swinging his sword still in its seat at Okita. Okita dodges out of the way, but this time jumps into the air, jumps off of Susanoo's own kneecap, and launches down an attack straight at Susanoo. And Susanoo's reaction speed is fucking amazing. Like, when you look at this panel right here, how the hell does he react to this attack? Because you're seeing Okita's speed firsthand, and he reacts, blocks the attack last second. He kicks Okita back, says, "Just like I expected. Tenin Rishin Ryu is the strongest when it comes to close quarters combat." He knocks Okita back again. This time, Okita fucking flies onto the damn roof. Goes onto the roof, face looks incredible. The red lightning coming out of his eyes, the aura is amazing, and the aura is explained this chapter, and I actually loved what they did with it, but we'll get to that in a second. He goes invisible again. This is the third or fourth time he goes invisible. This time he's scaling the buildings, jumping from building to building. Susanoo's perceiving it in the air. This is amazing. He gets behind Susanoo, jumps down. Susanoo barely fucking evades this attack. Okita is getting closer and closer with each attack. Susanoo's wobbled back, knocks back, reeling. Okita rushes around him, leaving after images around Susanoo. Susanoo's struggling to perceive it. He says, "Indeed, this is fun," because in the last one, when that panel was up of Okita's eyes, he said, "This is fun, isn't it? They're truly enjoying this fight. I love it." Ares says, "What even is that speed?" And in prime Hermes fashion, he's able to perceive all this movement. He doesn't think it's that impressive. He's like, it's not only about his speed. Each and every one of those slashes, they're packing so much power they can cleave his enemy in half. And this is a god, mind you. And even Zeus says, "What a terrifying killer instinct." Susanoo says, "That's the demon child, Okita Tsuji." Now, this is where the aura is explained. The red eyes are manifested by Okita Tsuji when he reaches a state of extreme excitement. It's called Onigo, the demon child technique. So this is a spin on like the Onigo technique he used in that manga, where he ends up sending 3 times the amount of normal blood flow through his heart, and all the cells in his body awaken. So you guys should have watched that video. And if you want to go watch that video after this, you can see I talked about all the techniques, and if there's more, which I'm forgetting maybe, they'll be in that video as well. Those eyes burning red are a testament to the rapid combustion of his life. Thanks to that, it becomes possible to exercise physical capabilities beyond the limitations of humanity. This dude is fucking awesome, and using the Onigo technique from the start is crazy, because I was thinking that this was going to be his amp later on. He's already using it off rip. There's no bullshit, no waiting. He lunges at Susanoo. Susanoo again dodges. He's not been able to land one hit on Susanoo, even after barraging him with all these shots. But this time when Susanoo dodges, he looks at Okita and sees this next one is going to be legit. His eyes and his smile fades. All of Okita's boys in the crowd, including Kondo, get hyped. They say it's coming. Here it comes. Okita's special move. Go for it. Okita screams out, "Here I come," and goes after Susanoo with his patented 3-pronged thrust San Denzuki, which is exactly what its name is, a 3-pronged thrust. He goes up top, to the middle, and down low, and Susanoo is getting pushed back but remains able to block every single one of the attacks. But the final one that he barely blocks breaks the sheath on the sword, and when the sheath breaks, Susanoo's eyes go full white. The pupils are gone. Heimdall says Okita's deadly technique, 3 stages thrust, was stopped by Susanoo at the last moment. He's screaming. Okita's boys are shocked that Susanoo was able to counter and block this attack. They say, "Are you for real? He stopped all 3 thrusts on his first try? I thought Okita would settle it with that." Again, another technique I mentioned in that video. But I love that they're getting all those techniques out of the way. He's paying homage to his first manga, and it tells us that there's more to come, which is amazing. New things that weren't even in that manga are going to be on the way, probably. Susanoo says, "So that's the godly speed of the 3-stage thrust. That's insane, dude. Don't you agree?" Ares is shocked as always. He says, "He stopped the attack, but I heard an unpleasant sound. Do you guys think that his sacred treasure broke?" And Hermes says, "Nope. What was destroyed was his sheath." And now we finally get the reveal of Susanoo's beautiful fucking blade, the majestic sword, one of heaven's supreme sacred treasures, Ame no Murakumo no Sarugi, heavenly sword of gathering clouds. Heimdall says Susanoo finally draws his sword, Ame no Murakumo. As he says this, some of the scholars in the crowd from Humanity are like, this can't be the case. No matter how you look at it, that's a katana. Ame no Murakumo is supposed to look completely different from the stories from Japanese history. Another one of the scholars says the curvature of that blade pattern, I just can't get enough of it. And then we cut to these random blacksmiths who are supposed to be these swordsmiths. They're of renown, probably butchering the names, but Uki Yatsuna, Sanjo Funachika, and Awataguchi Kunasuna. And these 3 are humans that worked on the blade, but they're not the only ones who worked on the blade. 2 deities worked on this blade alongside humanity. The 2 deities are the goddess of blacksmithing, Kana-Yogo. I'd assume she's from Japanese mythology, but I'm not sure. But her design is cool. We really rarely ever get to see goddess designs. We didn't get to see Artemis last fight, which I wanted, but we get to see her. She's got a great design. And Hephaestus, Greek god of blacksmithing and fire. He looks pretty cool. He's super buff. He's got this kind of interesting hair design, but don't forget he's Aphrodite's husband too. So hopefully we get some dialogue there. But Kana-Yogo says, "Ho ho, that's what I would expect looking at the sword. After all, as a blacksmith, I melted the legendary sacred sword, Ame no Murakumo." Hephaestus says a union of blacksmiths gathered by gods and humans respectively poured the best of their skills into the forging of a new sword. That's why it's the ultimate sword. Heimdall says, "Amazing, that's some unbelievable information. You're saying that sword wielded by Susanoo is a collaboration between both gods and humans." This is really cool because Susanoo obviously has a ton of admiration for Okita as a human, which is a lot of humility for a god. And it's further expounded upon by the fact that he allowed humans to work on his blade. Susanoo says, "It's a shame that I couldn't give it an introduction far more glorious than that." Talking about the blade. And Okita's even acknowledging at this point. He's got a smile on his face. He's like, "That sword is really nice." Susanoo gets all eccentric at this point and says, right. This rounded handwriting, this majestic blade, can someone even resist it? Throughout heaven and earth, this is the greatest sword. I named it Onigiri Ame no Murakumo. So we changed the name because it's, it's an upgrade. Heavenly demon slaying sword of the gathering clouds. Fucking amazing. I love the throughout heaven and earth thing. Shout out to Buddha, shout out to Gojo. This man Susanoo is him. I love his character and he's a straight monster. Susanoo says, "I never thought the day would come when I would use this. It's the only sword fit to slay the demon child," with an epic panel of the sword. Beautiful katana this is. We cut to Sasuke and Musashi, 2 of the greatest swordsmen. They're calling it amazing. Sasuke says he's surprised to think that humans and gods would work together to transform a sword into a katana. And Wrist, Sasuke's Valkyrie, says, "This is absurd. For a sacred treasure to be upgraded, this is insane. Like, this is unheard of, so to speak. Lord Susanoo has exceeded my expectations." So the first time we've heard of a sacred treasure that was already established being upgraded to a new level. This could be one of the strongest sacred treasures of all time in this series. That's what they meant when they called it supreme. She finishes up with, "He really is unusual." Susanoo says, "Well, time to make this sword live up to its hype." And he gets prepared. He goes into a stance, and it was nothing out of the ordinary. The crowd was confused. They're like, all that, and he's just doing this basic ass stance, like what's going on? And then all of a sudden it hits everyone. That's not the case. These swordsmen start spouting off stances that they recognize. One says the oxbull stance. No, actually it's Albert the Fool stance. No, actually it looks like Hasa no Kame, the 8 direction stance. And it just keeps going on and on. One even says it's Spanish swordsmanship. And this is the constant. They keep seeing all these different sword stances because this technique that Susanoo is doing isn't any of them. It's all of them together. The crowd can't figure out why there's so many different opinions just from that stance, and he's not moving a muscle. As the swordsmen were all shaken by the sight of the stance, the first to notice something unusual was Okita. And when Okita notices what's really going on, his smile fades and he is shook as hell. He's sweating. This man knows he's in for a fucking war. Without a moment's delay, Sasaki and Musashi pick up on it, as well as Okita's crew, Shinshin Gumi. They understand the truth of what's really happening here. Sasaki says, that guy, he's amazing. Musashi says, so that's the stance of the sword god Susanoo. Rish doesn't know what's going on. She's like, what's up with you guys? Isn't he just standing there normally? Like, what's the big deal? And Sasaki says, no, the pinnacle of the sword, no, those who aspire to it should be able to see it. That stance is every single one of them. That's right, beyond the Seigan, godly myriad, and it is this fucking epic panel of Susanoo, jacked as hell with every sword technique behind him with the white demon eyes. He is a monster. And Susanoo looks Okita in his soul and says, if you're truly Okita Tsuji, you can see it, can't you? In Okita's eyes, they got those Puma eyes. He knows what it is. Susanoo says, what I wield now are all the swords. Show me everything you got, Okita Tsuji. Like a god dwelling in all creation, every single stance was there. We get some crazy shots where those two start rushing at each other, and we also get to see Aphrodite back in the crowd with Shiva, Jack the Ripper with his Valkyrie, Brunhilde and Gold, who still haven't had much dialogue in this entire fight. And we get this really, one of my favorite panels of the chapter is Okita, thrusting his sword and Susanoo countering. It's just a really cool panel in my opinion. We see that they keep countering each other. They're like straight up, they're such a good match. Susanoo launches Okita into one of the buildings. Okita uses the momentum to jump back off the building and launch another attack. It's really, really cool. Okita's face looks really awesome. Susanoo barely dodges. Okita grabs on his katana with two hands, uses Ryubi Ken Dragon Tail sword and slices, but Susanoo counters with his own. His eyes go white. There's this huge impact frame in the middle of them. We actually find out that this sword slash was the first slash to somewhat land, and it lands on Okita. Susanoo draws first blood as a small scar forms on Okita's face and drops of blood start leaking down. Okita then realizes this. The crowd starts going crazy. They can't even tell what's happening. They can't even see what's happening. What an amazing sword fight. These two men are super hard to follow. The sword god and the demon child are fighting to the death. Susanoo's godly myriad swallows Okita's sword strikes that wield the godly speed, says Heimdall, and Okita reacts and counterattacks even to that. But Susanoo dodges and counterattacks even further. The clash between the strongest Godslayer and the strongest Manslayer. This is the peak of bloody battles between swords. We then get Hermes, who says, I don't want to get distracted even if it's for an instant. Big Brother's so surprised his soul left his body, so of course Hermes can see all the movements as usual. Zeus then gets in his buff form and says, swords are cool, but what I really want are fists. We then see Anubis, who looks like a straight up dog, like he's drooling from his mouth. He says, I'm so hyped I can barely wait. That's just so amazing. Man, I knew I shouldn't have given up my turn. I can't get enough of that human. It's floating all the way there. The best smell of all. The best and strongest, the smell of death. And we get a shot of Okita. We then see Sasaki and Musashi talking about the sword stances. And Sasaki says, as far as we can see, every single one of them is there. That god Susanoo has mastered all sword techniques in all schools created by mankind throughout history. He can comprehend them all. And perhaps he's reached the peak of all those styles. His Valkyrie says, sword god, he's more like a metamorphic sword. Sasaki says, I can't get enough of it. Now let's see how you can win against that god. Show me. The strongest of the Edo period, Okita Tsuji. So I love this dialogue from Sasaki because it's not showing any signs of inferiority to these swordsmen. He's just intrigued and he wants to see the strongest of the Edo period, how he reacts to it. I love this. Susanoo says, your Ryubi Ken Dragon Tail attack from a moment ago was an amazing technique. It was majestic. You were gonna chop my arms off in that counterattack, says Okita. How can you say that? That was so cool. So they're both glazing each other, basically, both super impressed. And Okita has this giant smile on his face and says he's having so much fun. Shinshin Gumi is shown, and they say if he loses concentration even for a moment, he'll die instantly, Kondo says, I doubt he's even afraid of death at this point. Every day was a battlefield. Death was always next to him. For us, the Shinshin Gumi, fights to the death were our everyday life. Susanoo says, you're still laughing. That's why you're the captain of the first unit of the Shinshin Gumi. The one and only Okita Tsuji against the infinite positions, the godly myriad. And Okita goes into this demonic stance. The stance of the smiling demon was formless and he looks like a beast. It reminds me of Baki, like when he uses those like formless attacks. He's so fluid in his movements. The crowd's confused though. They're like, what happened? He lowered his guard. Musashi says, is that the formless stance of Yaigu? Sasuke says, no, it's similar though, but that's not correct. It's possibly not a form learned somewhere else. In order to survive the hell of the Bakumatsu period, he naturally acquired that through fighting to the death with many samurais of the period. That's what I believe. Naturally, yeah. Susanoo is sweating now and he's like, oh, would you look at that? I'm loving this. This is about to get wild as hell. And Okita says, me too. Motherfucker is cold, bro. He's about to get wild. He's got that scar on his face. He says, here I go with this amazing panel. His face is so serious now. The air around me has changed. The piercing sword pressure. And Okita, you start seeing him flowing into his movements. He rushes after Susanoo, but it's so smooth and fluid. Susanoo cannot even see what's happening. He literally can't see the attacks, but somehow still reacts. His instincts are just that good. He blocks the initial slash. The second one, he's got him on the back foot. 2 more sword slashes come. Susanoo's barely blocking. He gets prepared to counter. Sasuke says there's one thing that Okita has that surpasses that god. That's his countless near-death experiences. And you see that Okita actually this time is able to land for the first time on Susanoo with a sword thrust that pierces Susanoo's left arm. Susanoo says that's Okita's sword, and boom, you see this giant slash where blood splatters everywhere to end the chapter. Okita has cut through Susanoo's arm. We don't know if he lost his arm. We don't know what happened. That's the final page. But what a chapter. So we pick up right where we left off at the end of the last chapter with Okita landing the first real blow on Susanoo. Obviously, Okita was slightly cut on his cheek, so that was technically the first blow, but this is the one that was significant. Some people thought it slashed his arm. It's actually just a straight up slash right to the midsection. Kind of reminds me of Zoro's scar that he got from Mihawk. With an unexpected move, Okita Tsuji delivers a slash with all his strength, says Heimdall, heaven's strongest god slayer. Susanoo takes a lot of damage, blood splattered everywhere obviously. Susanoo Mikoto was brought to his knees. He falls to his knees, which is pretty crazy. Now in this moment, Susanoo kind of just has a smirk on his face. He's very self-satisfied instead of following up. Which, to this point, I've talked about how much I've really enjoyed this fight in the way that Okita was all action, going for the kill in every strike, and like really didn't hesitate. He was not even really talking. This time, I think it's more so showmanship out of respect. And he landed the first blow in this duel. So Okita smiles, looks very overconfident at this point, which kind of tells us the pendulum's gonna swing. Crowd goes crazy. The Shinshin Gumi start getting all hyped up. One of them says, quit making a fuss, you idiots. We should expect this. It's Okita after all. It's understandable that they would make a fuss about it, but not us. Look, gods, that's the one who is feared as the strongest in the Battle of Kyoto. Our sword, the sword of the Shinshin Gumi. We then see Musashi and Sasuke talking. Musashi says, formless yet a deadly aura. That, while at the same time, lacks killing intent. Now this is a weird translation. I don't know if this is going to be refined later on, because I thought the whole purpose was that every strike between these two was killing, but maybe it's because, you know, that was the blow that was landed in the duel, and obviously Okita didn't go for the kill after, so maybe we'll see. Musashi says this is a realm that can only be reached by swordsmen who have crossed countless life and death situations. Yeah, the reason why his sword is so sharp is precisely because the battlefield was his daily life. Okita Tsuji, that's one hell of a feat to be able to land even a single blow on the sword god in a sword duel. We then see Brunhilde and Goal. Goal says, awesome, I knew that human is super duper amazing, but Hilda is not going to be too hasty. She says, Goal, it's too early to celebrate. That god who knows about the greatness of humanity better than anyone else is none other than Susanoo no Mikoto. Meaning that he is in no way, shape, or form going to be caught by surprise by Okita like some of the other gods. He went into this matchup fully understanding how strong Okita truly was, how strong humanity truly is, and how skilled they are. So he was prepared, and he's still going to be very, very dangerous. We then get a narration. Why is Susanoo no Mikoto praised as the founder of swordsmanship? Is it because his title, the sword god? Is it because his legendary Ame no Marakumo no Sarugi, his sword? No. Susanoo is the founder of the sword, but not the founder of swordsmanship. And Susanoo says he's hyped in between the narration. We get some cool panels of him getting back to his feet. The aura around Susanoo is crazy. He looks like a demon. I love his design. It's one of the best designs in Ragnarok, in my opinion. So he gets back to his feet with his sword in the dirt, says I'm hyped, and we cut into his backstory. So I actually like this backstory. It goes into then who truly is the founder of swordsmanship and what is swordsmanship. I like this because him being the god of sword and the god of swordsmanship kind of makes you think, well, how in the fuck could he actually ever lose in a sword fight? If he's truly the god of swordsmanship, he should be the most skilled. But now we're gonna get an explanation on this. From birth, Susanoo no Mikoto was perfect and flawless. He was the highest ranking noble god in Japanese mythology. As it was requested, he cut down all the evil gods and evil spirits with a single slash of his sword. Even though he was revered as the sword god and the strongest god slayer, his soul hung in a state of tranquility. Throughout this, we get a lot of cool shots, humanity praising him cutting down evil spirits. He looks like he has the One Piece like awakening sash, and he's very unimpressed and kind of almost living a meaningless life when he's just at the top. It's lonely at the top. He says that was easy when he cut down the people. And one day the creator god Izanagi gave orders to the 3 noble gods he created. Now I've heard some rumblings that this Izanagi is actually one of the primordials. We don't get a full reveal on him, but he is clearly the upper echelon of this pantheon. He is not one of the 3 noble gods, he's their creator. So he sits above the 3 gods we're going to get introduced to here, which are Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and of course obviously Susanoo. They serve as the 3 noble gods, and they are siblings, Amaterasu being the sister and Susanoo and Tsukuyomi being the 2 brothers. And by Izanagi's decree, Amaterasu was to rule over the heavens, and I think she's the sun goddess as well. Tsukuyomi was to rule over the ocean. He's also the moon god, which makes sense with the tide and everything. And Susanoo was supposed to be, according to this translation, the ruler of the earth. And he is also supposed to be the god of storms, and Record of Ragnarok, he's the god of the sword and shit like that. So they served as the 3 noble gods. Susanoo says, as you wish. He didn't look all too happy about it, but obviously he was following the orders essentially, and I'm pretty sure Izanagi is supposed to be their father. Well, he's their creator, so kind of the father of everybody in that pantheon. So he descended down to earth, and this is when he defeated the Yamata no Orochi, the giant hydra. This is a really dope ass panel. We get a shot of humanity praising it. One of the ladies is specifically highlighted. Seems like she's starstruck as soon as she sees him. To fulfill his divine mission, he exterminated the rampaging monsters, traveled throughout the land. He simply wielded his sword, but he didn't know the true meaning of swordsmanship. What he was doing was he was just slicing with power. He overwhelmed everything that he fought with just pure power. It was a divine weapon that was really going to be unrivaled to all the opponents he was going to face. And that was kind of his life until one day he saw this village. And when he arrived at this village, there was this giant troll-like being that was attempting to raid the village, attempting to torment the village, and he witnessed the scene that would shape his divine life. This troll was trying to, kidnap a little girl, and there was just one human that was far smaller, and he did not back down. He told his sister that he would protect her, and Susanoo watched this from afar and was like, there's an overwhelming difference in power. The boy is brave, but the outcome is clear. There's no way he can beat that thing. So the giant went to swing down his club, and the boy was able to counter the club strike and redirect the momentum to make the big man stumble, allowing him to land a sword strike right on the neck of the ogre, killing and defeating him. So he parried the opponent's sword, stepped forward, and struck. This was the fundamental principle of swordsmanship for humans. So he had saw this ability and this technique that allowed lesser beings or smaller beings to get the upper hand and potentially win with pure skill over somebody that should otherwise destroy them. So he was appalled. He jumped down as a god and went to talk to this human and says, what was that just now? Tell me what I saw. He's like, that big guy was watching. He did this god thing and then swoosh, and then he made a trump. So it's supposed to be just like him being absolutely shocked, like babbling on to this kid. You can see it. He's just asking him like, what was that? And the kid simply says, it was the sword. Even with my small body, I can fight an opponent this big because of swordsmanship. In my village, we come up with all sorts of ways to use a sword. We always train together to get stronger using these skills. Everyone is using the way of the sword. There's also a mural of the god Susanoo in my village. He's a god who saved mankind long ago. They say Lord Susa defeated a monster much bigger than himself with just one sword. That legend is so awesome. Everyone aspires to be like him. Of course, that's talking about Susanoo, and he's very flattered by this comment. He kind of cries. And the kid says he wants to be like Susanoo someday. We get the realization that to the gods and Susanoo, the sword was nothing more than a tool imbued with divine power to swing down opponents and to slash them into pieces. So as I mentioned before, he was just too powerful for his opponents. It didn't matter about his size because he was obviously imbued with divine power, far reaching beyond any being that was on Earth at that point that he had come across. So it wasn't really about skill, it was more so just he was too powerful. Nevertheless, beings he assumed to be far smaller and weaker than a god, created the art of slaying stronger opponents using the sword, using skill. And Susanoo kind of is like having a culture shock moment. The kid asks him if he's all right. He says he's ashamed of himself. What exactly is the difference between my sword and the swords of these people? What the hell? That's not reason enough. Simply the sword. That word is not enough. It's not simply just the sword. Jutsu, art. That's right. Kenjutsu, swordsmanship, the art of the sword. And that is how he founded kenjutsu, so to speak. And he actually bows down to the kid. And the narrator says Susanoo no Mikoto, the one praised as the sword god, knelt before the nameless human boy in the most natural way possible. Knelt to him down like kowtow. The kid's like, whoa, what are you doing? And Susanoo says, you humans are amazing. That's why I beg you, please teach me swordsmanship too. He became the first god to seek guidance from humans. Now, obviously, he's super humble to do this. And, you know, brought a lot of meaning and purpose to his life to follow and figure out what the way of the sword is. But obviously the other gods at Takamagahara weren't too pleased with this. You know, they obviously think of themselves very highly. So we actually cut back to Amaterasu, his sister of the three noble gods. And it seems that she is the one in charge. Obviously Izanagi is above them, but if he's the primordial god indeed, it seems that he is not really taking part in, you know, ruling anything anymore, or if he's even around anymore, maybe he got sealed away like with the other primordials. She seems to be the one in charge. She says, you the sword god, learn sword from humans. Have you lost your mind? Susanoo tries defending himself and says it's not sword, it's swordsmanship. And Tsukiyomi is calling him an idiot, calling him a dumbass, saying, what are you doing? Why would you be asking humans to help you? You're a god. And also, what's up with the dialect that you're using? Are you imitating humans, or are you looking down on Big Sister and me? Anyway, a god who is one of the three noble gods would never seek aid from lowly humans. Do you think such an act that denigrates the dignity of a god would ever be accepted, Susanoo? Susanoo looks a little angry. He says, well, I didn't think you would allow it. In that case, I'm officially resigning from my position as being one of the three noble gods. The siblings are shocked by this, and Tsukiyomi tries telling Amaterasu, like, man, he's lost his mind, like, whatever. Amaterasu says, Sano, can I ask you something? Why are you so obsessed with this swordsmanship thing? And Susanoo says, I'm really just hyped, which is what he keeps saying during this fight. I just really hyped, and then they're even like hyped, like what the fuck? Even though I was born as one of the three noble gods, the power to be called the sword god, and the adoration of the common people, those are all things I had since the beginning. However, human swordsmanship is different. Only those who lack in these things can truly appreciate them. The value of what they have earned through hard work and mutual refinement. In truth, swordsmanship is endless. Once you've experienced something so interesting, you can't just stop now, can you? For the first time in my life, my heart is boiling. And I respect this. I obviously think that it's easy to see that he just got bored being a god, just slaying everything, and he wanted to add some purpose to where he actually had a goal where he wanted to achieve what humans had. Swordsmanship. Maybe he's ungrateful for his position, but it's interesting to say the least. Maybe one of the most unique god backstories we've had. Tsukiyomi says, by the gods, I have no idea. What the hell are you talking about? Nonsense, it all makes no sense. Amaterasu says, interesting you say. It's alright then, you can do as you like, Susanoo. However, there's always a but. That's a shameless act for a god. I will never allow you to set foot in Takamagahara ever again. Susanoo, I hereby sentence you to eternal exile. That's why I say I think she's in charge, because she seems to be the one that's like laying down the law, like, I'll never allow you to set foot here. She's the one sitting on the throne. Susanoo agrees, kneels before, and she says one more thing. It's regarding the dignity of other gods. I will not allow you to receive direct instruction from humans or expose yourself to them. I will only allow you to learn. Is that fine? Meaning that he cannot actually have a teacher that is human. He cannot seek them out and train with them and disclose that he's a god. He can only watch from afar, which is actually pretty interesting because he had to learn this on his own. He had to just watch and learn it. And he says, yeah, that's fine. Thank you, big sis. And he was thereby exiled forever. We find out that he had like this bird form. He can transform into a bird. That'd be really cool if he had like something of a hybrid form that he used, which, I mean, it looks like he can kind of partially transform too. I don't think he's going to in the fight, but it'd be cool. He traveled around hiding his identity and just simply observing. And actually a little cool Easter egg is in Sasaki's backstory, there was that bird that was watching Sasaki train, and that seems to have been Susanoo watching him, obviously, as well as he watched humanity for hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years. Regardless of the culture, east or west, he watched it all. And the swordsmanship that sword masters have poured their lives into creating, he relentlessly studied, absorb the principles of that art to the fullest. And we get this really cool training montage where he was even imitating Okita, his Sandenzuki, his thrust technique. He has this really cool beard, long ass hair, it looks cool. And he was seeking only for moments that would make his heart boil. We then cut back to the fight and he says, in Kyoto of the Bakumatsu, as I saw it, politics, thoughts, and in everything that they did or said, swordsmanship was at the center of everything. It really was the best moment in time. Okita says, you really enjoy swordsmanship, don't you? Susanoo replies and says, yeah. And then, Okita, you are the strongest manslayer. I never thought the day would come when I'd fight you to the death like this. That's why I would like to thank you. And that's when Okita's smile finally fades. That overconfident smirk, it fades. He feels the aura of Susanoo, and Susanoo says, I want to make you boil too, with this cool panel of him lifting the sword out of the ground with blood on his hands. And that is going to be the cliffhanger to go into chapter 90. And this is absolutely insanity. We start off right where we left off last chapter. Obviously we had the big backstory of Susanoo, but we also saw Susanoo take a serious blow from Okita, and he was rising back up, insinuating something serious was coming now that he'd been hit like that. We start the chapter with all this aura clouding around Susanoo, shrouded in an extraordinary sword aura, the onigiri, Ame no Murakumo, and the stance of that sword god wielding that extraordinary sacred treasure truly are uncommon and bizarre. With an absolutely insane panel of Susanoo. The aura for Susanoo, you could honestly argue, is the best in the series, but it's rivaled by his competitor, as you're gonna see going forward. Even when you look at these panels, you can see that Okita is noticing this ain't what he had been seeing. This is something completely new, and clearly he's rattled. With that said, we see Susanoo load back this stance where he holds the sword in one hand, and the sword is much smaller than I thought, and he stays absolutely still. We get this really cool shot of Susanoo with his hand outstretched toward Okita as he basically taunts him to come forward. We see Heimdall go crazy. He says, what in the world is that stance? Susanoo confronts the demon child with a bizarre stance. Susanoo says, isn't this amazing, Okita? The ace up my sleeve. Dialogue only true swordsman could have, understanding and respecting the fact that Okita 100% undoubtedly understands what he is facing at this point. Okita doesn't back down. A smile crosses his face and he steps forward like the menace he is. Such an amazing sword aura, he thinks. The crowd says an amazing stance, but I think I've seen it before. Indeed, it looks like it's the very image of Susanoo no Mikoto depicted in the cotton paintings passed down through mythology. Another cool mural. We saw Susanoo get some murals earlier in the fight. We also saw Raiden and Shiva get these. We then cut to Sasuke and Musashi, who are proving to be invaluable in this fight for explanations, and it's, you know, great to see them. I really appreciate how the usual suspects like Zeus and Ares, Hermes have kind of taken a backseat this fight and really just let us get the explanation from the master swordsman in the verse, Sasuke, and Musashi, who was on par with him or greater than him in his actual life. It's a small little detail that I think really makes this fight even better. Sasuke says, is that a one-hit kill stance the moment he enters his fighting range? Musashi says, but I've never seen a stance like that in any school. Although the essence of that technique seems similar to Ae. What is Ae? Says Haris. Sasuke says, yes. As its characters say, it's about standing still in the place you are, and then match the movement of the approaching opponent and cut them down with one single strike, a fighting style whose strength is the defense. Musashi then says, but that stance in particular seems different from the IA we know. That's a completely different thing. I really like the paneling here, as we see Susanoo still standing still with his hand outstretched with the blood on his fingers. We then cut to Susanoo's siblings and a surprise that we're gonna get to. Tsukiyomi screams out, vulgar, vulgar, vulgar. Don't forget, he was obviously opposed to his brother going and getting taught by humans or even associating with humans in general. He says, so Susanoo is using that technique at last, a technique that was developed and honed alongside humanity. Just the thought of this is enough to make me shudder. We then see Amaterasu, who was more willing to allow Susanoo to go, but she did banish him. And she says, this is going to be a sight to behold. Sano's secret technique is amazing, you know. And then sitting behind these two is the big dog, Izanagi, the creator god who they didn't want to show us last chapter for whatever reason with a full panel of his face, full reveal. We get the full reveal. We see him in all his glory. He is what seems to be the chief god of this pantheon, the head honcho. No word whether or not he's a primordial or not, but like I said in my spoiler video, primordials are supposed to be dead. So if he was a primordial, he'd have to be an exception to that rule. It makes more sense probably at this point that he's just their Zeus, apparently. He actually gets some dialogue too. He laughs at his son and he says, "Now, what are you going to do about this little guy?" Talking about Okita. This is cool, man. The way he was sitting was really awesome. So Susanoo's aura continues to cloud the sword. Okita says, "That's an interesting stance. Once I'm within your striking range, you'll cut me in half. Isn't that right? However, you won't lay a single hit on me." Absolute confidence from Okita at this point still, which is interesting to say the least. Is he bluffing? Who knows? And Susanoo comes back with, "We'll see about that." Okita starts charging forward head on, runs right towards Susanoo, but at the last second he keeps backing away. So he basically keeps going like a cat, jumping in, jumping back out, jumping in, jumping back out. Every time at the last second, it's as if he's toying with them, says Heimdall. Okita is constantly moving in and out of Susanoo's striking range. Is this a strategy to avoid being targeted by Susanoo and wait for an opportunity to strike him? Questions Heimdall. And we see this montage of panels where it actually even looks like Okita has after images, but it might just be the paneling of him dodging in and out from each angle. Then we also see that he cannot find an opening no matter where he goes. Susanoo's stance remains untethered. Okita comes to the realization that just by looking at this technique, he can see that there are no openings for him to strike. We get this panel of Susanoo's hand, which seems to be outstretched over the entirety of the battlefield, encapsulating just how much range Susanoo has. It's almost like an infinite range. There's no openings whatsoever. Any angle Okita tries to strike from, he is going to be cut. As expected of Okita, says Susanoo with a wide grin on his face. But against this, any attempt to read distance is useless. He said, "You fearlessly approach, but you cannot crack the code." Susanoo winds back the sword even further, and this time, Okita realized the attack is actually underway. Susanoo unleashes, screams out, ready to go, and Okita jumps back quickly, but it's not enough. At this distance, this should be impossible. There's no way Susanoo could reach him from that far away. We get this absolutely incredible panel of Okita's hair flipped up as he looks on as the attack is coming his way. Completely at a loss for words at how this is even going to be something that's conceivable. Susanoo's attack strikes out and extends far past the reach of his sword, almost like a wind slash. And it reminds me of Sukuna's world-cutting slash. Okita initially attempts to try to block it, but there's no blocking this slash. And it's revealed to us that at the last second, Okita rolled with the strike, akin to like what a boxer would do when he rolls with the punch. Otherwise, he would have been straight up cleaved in half. If he tried to block it head on, he would have been cut in half. But he rolled with this strike. The panels here are crazy, dude. Obviously, already one of the best arenas, best stages, with the ambiance, with the moonlight in the back. But in the night sky, with the town nearby, you see the scale of this slash and what it does. It's one of the coolest moments we've had. We then see Susanoo finally rest after the strike is completed. He blows out the air. Secret technique, reverse heavenly demon. One of my favorite panels of Susanoo right there too. But this sword slash didn't just stop at Okita. It crushed the city. The damage was so great. The Shinshin Gumi, and especially Kondo, are extremely worried about what they're going to see when the dust settles. Is it possible that Okita truly avoided the brunt of that attack? As you see, the city is just in ruin behind Okita. He completely wiped out an entire chunk of the city with one sword slash. Heimdall screams out, "What in the world?" At this point, I have no idea what's happening. The sword god single slash cleaved through the city of Kyoto. We see Okita on the ground, and all he can do is look with no words. He just looks in Susanoo's direction in disbelief. A far cry from his statements of, "You're not gonna land a single hit on me." Motherfucker was humbled in this moment. You see the crowd react. Amazing Susanoo. Now the view really improved. Which is actually funny as shit, because I always wonder, I'm like, bro, how are they looking at this fight? Because it's such a huge arena. They got monitors, obviously, but now part of the city's gone, so now the view is even more clear. Sasuke watches on with satisfaction. His Valkyrie wrist says, "Such a wide attack range. What kind of ability is that?" And Sasuke chuckles and says, "Nah, that wasn't an ability. That was just a strong and fast swing of his sword." There wasn't nothing special to that. He just swung his sword and that's what it caused. All that devastation was simply just a basic slash from Susanoo. Nothing added, nothing needed, That's it. Wrist is in disbelief. She says, no way his swing just did that. With tremendous speed and force, the sword was swung, tearing through the air and creating a vacuum sword at the tip of the sword. It's like his sword stretched out. Exceeding its natural range, he managed to slice through Okita and the streets of Kyoto. Is it possible to do such a thing when you master the sword, says Wrist. Sasuke says, if only it was easy like that. That blow was only possible because of Susanoo and that sword. Perhaps for us humans, an unimaginably long time, 100 years, 1,000 years, or even more. Perhaps he simply swung his sword relentlessly. It must take a deep love for the sword and the sword's love in return in order to achieve such a feat. So I think what he means to say there is that if a human were to be able to do that, it would take them 10 lifetimes basically. It would take them 1,000 years or even more to be able to achieve something like that. But in Susanoo's case, he's special. It was much easier for him, and that comes from the deep connection with the sword. You see Okita rise back to his feet at this point, and Susanoo's impressed. You reacted to my attack on your first try. You rolled sideways to deflect the vacuum blade, didn't you? As expected from the strongest manslayer of the Bakumatsu. Okita just looks at him. Susanoo continues, if you would have tried to block it directly, you'd have been cleaved in half. And Okita agrees. He thinks to himself without speaking this out loud to Susanoo, if I had been even a moment slower to react, I would have been undoubtedly destroyed, cut into pieces. He's impressed with Susanoo as we see that Okita's arm is ravaged. The arm he tried initially blocking with and rolled has been cut all the way up and down. Susanoo goes back into his stance and says, what's the matter? Even the demon child is afraid now? Okita collects himself. A smile crosses his face. Sorry about that. The sound of my racing heart is surprisingly pleasant. If you guys remember his Onago technique, he pumps the blood into his body, makes him stronger, faster, everything. But this is something different. We see what looks to be Izanagi emitting off Tsuji. There's lightning coming off the ground at this point. The aura of the demon child is immense. He says, I am glad. I am glad that I accepted this fight to the death after all. Thanks to you, it feels like I am burning more and more as his eye is revealed to us now, and it looks as if the whites of his eyes have evaporated, burned, seared off his body. The veins in his face look like they're going to explode. His heart is beating faster now than ever before. The blood in his system is racing through his body. I think I can do this. Shinsengumi is at a loss. They can't even get their words out. They say, hey, Tsuji, he's acting weird. His eyes are glowing redder than usual. Damn, it looks just like a demon. As the aura that comes out of Susanoo's eyes, usually that small streak, now they're thick streaks that look like demonic horns coming out of both eyes. The aura around his sword is now a blackened, dark aura. All through his cloak, his body screams out in agony, what seems to be burning, a burning body, as we see the streaks through his arm, the damage dealt to him, with perhaps the widest grin you've ever seen, a demonic smile. It almost looks as if he's straight up levitating. He might be levitating at this point. This man might have just transcended everything, and now his sheer aura alone has sprung him into the air. This is actually insane. Susanoo says, I am surprised to think there was something beyond Onago. I told you guys in my prediction way before, as I broke down all the stuff from the spinoff. Onago was in the spinoff, obviously. We are going to see hidden wrinkles, things we never saw in that manga. There's going to be a new power-up that he never got to use, and this is it. Only by way of the sword god Susanoo. The sword god knew in that moment that he had truly awakened his demon child. No, the true sword demon within. And we get perhaps one of the coldest panels in Record of Ragnarok history, especially as a split screen of the two faces of the warriors. We see Susanoo on one side, visible sweat on his face as he knows what's to come, as he says, I am hyped, I am pumped, I am ready. And on the other side, we look at Okita's face that only reminds me of Shigaraki. It looks as if his skin is cracking, tearing apart, flames emitting off of him. It almost looks like decay as he screams out at the top of his lungs, I am going to break you. And that is the chapter. So we pick up right where we left off with the panel that looked as if Okita was levitating. The man is turned into a literal demon, and the crowd themselves are seeing this. They're like, holy shit, He looks just like a real demon. And the aura around him, not sure exactly what it is, but it's tied to the Onigo technique, is basically calling forth these aural horns. It looks like he has demonic horns. I talked about this in my breakdown last month. It's fucking epic. And this panel is even more detailed than anything we got last month. Looks as if the flesh is truly being torn off of his body. It's insane. And the lightning coming out of his eyes. Everything about this panel is peak. Bro, I'm reading this in real time, bro. And dude, the next panel, bro, it's like the fucking lightning coming out of his body and his head, bro. It looks like it fucking just propelled him into the air. I was just not expecting that shit at all. And the smoke is clearing all around. That man is cold. Okita says, yep, I think I can do this now. Now the demon child took an unusual form, says Heimdall. How will he challenge the sword god's deadly technique? Okita sprints toward him. Man, the lightning is insane. He's charging head on. Susanoo keeps his sword stance, ready to strike, ready to counter. But he looks like a fucking gazelle being hunted by a damn cheetah right now. Ares says, fool, he would definitely be cleaved in half this time. Mind you, this is the same stance he just used to wipe out the city. Susanoo, that is. So Ares is spitting. But you know that since he said it, it's probably going to be capped. So Susanoo launches back the attack, getting ready to strike. And it actually looks as if Okita reacts first, but then the slash comes and it starts pushing him back. I think what happens is I think Okita is like dodging the attack. And then at the last second, he actually cleaves the fucking attack. And his eyes have like completely been enveloped with that red aura. It's actually pretty savage, this whole thing. Yeah, exactly. So Heimdall basically thought Okita was pushed back. He said, holy smoke, Okita was blown away. But then he's like, no. He starts stuttering because Okita actually countered it, sliced down on it, and got around the slash to get in close on Susanoo, which is crazy. It caught Susanoo by surprise, closed the distance in an instant. Heimdall says Okita successfully avoided that mortal blow. In a heartbeat, he managed to invade the range of Susanoo's chest. But Susanoo was able to react fast enough to block Okita's attack when he got inside. The two have something of a sword struggle here in the middle. Susanoo says, to think you would attempt to clash against my Ame no Geisha. Isn't that a bit reckless? And Okita's like, next time I'll do much better. They keep pushing sword against sword, and Susanoo screams out, ha. But Okita's the one that ends up getting the upper hand. He's pushing Susanoo back. The smaller stature man is pushing the large god back. You can see Susanoo's feet drawing lines in the sand because he's getting pushed. You also see the aura that envelops Okita's entire body is going all the way up and down his body through his legs. You see his veins are pulsating out of his calves. This man is truly in the zone. Susanoo thinks to himself, both his speed and power, they've increased drastically. He says aloud now, you're doing great to Okita. He's able to eventually push Okita off of him. He screams out Dora as Okita goes flying back, but immediately stops his momentum and flies right back with another charge. They then meet in the middle again as Ares watches in astonishment and says, wow, he took Ame no Geisha head on. How can he still fight? Hermes says you can't see it. At that moment, Okita, who had been charging forward, took a back step to keep some distance. It seems that the vacuum blade created by the Ame no Geisha weakens the further it travels. So they give us a little depiction of it. This is weird considering it literally just leveled half a city. So maybe this was a weaker version, but I don't know. Apparently Okita got out of the range though, and he determined the distance for a counterattack within the range. He was able to deflect the vacuum blade. And Ares is like, what are you talking about? Shouldn't the vacuum blade be invisible? And Hermes says, of course, that may be the case for you, my big brother, but Okita should be able to see it. The movement of the air caused by the approaching vacuum, the gaps in the dust clouds, and perhaps even the slight refraction of light caused by the change of the air density. Do you understand? So Okita's perception is on a whole nother level, potentially perceiving variations in light refractions. Ares says, wow, to think he would be able to do that just by witnessing the technique once. He can see that far ahead. Now we get a reaction from Zeus. He says, in order to prevent Susanoo from building up the power needed for that technique, he closed the distance instantly and initiated close quarters combat, also known as CQC. My Lookism fans know what that is. As expected. What the fuck? So Zeus says, as expected from the strongest in combat. That is a crazy statement. There's like, this is obviously not the official translation, but we're going to talk about this more as we go. That is wild if he called him the strongest in combat. We need more on that. But anyway, as he was speaking, It looks as if Okita was barraging Susanoo with strikes, and he might have actually landed one on Susanoo's arm because we see blood splatter from his arm, so he might have hit him there. We see that Okita's launching this multitude of attacks at Susanoo. They keep clashing in the middle, all fast-paced action. Zeus says he's living up to his hype, and he dodges one at the last second. It seems that he clearly has a slight advantage on Susanoo here as he ducks underneath Susanoo's thrust. He says, and Susanoo lets out a laugh. Okita then starts circling around Susanoo in quick succession, looking for an opening. Susanoo tries to strike him, but the movements are too fast. He's getting caught, he's missing, he's catching air. Seeing the after images of Okita. Kondo and the Shinshin Gumi are speaking now, and they say, amazing, what are those movements? This is a completely different level from what I've known Okita to be before. Kondo says, in the world of the living, since his body was ravaged by disease, Okita wasn't able to bring forth even half of Onago's power. In other words, this is the real Okita Tsuji. And we get this montage of Okita obviously being played with tuberculosis and illness. And this is a really cool wrinkle because it calls back to their prequel. He's obviously always been able to use this Onago technique, but because of his illness, not even half was able to be brought forth. And now this is the real Okita. And this looks like he's fucking created a demonic arm, bro. His arm looks bulked as shit. This panel is amazing. I said this before. He looks like a damn cheetah, a jackal out there on the hunt. He is on this prey. Susanoo says, is he planning to attack my blind spot at this speed? He's trying to track Okita's movements. Okita stops. That's where we see that awesome panel. And all of a sudden, Susanoo gets surprised and apprehensive. And Okita calls out Tenin Rishin Ryu, secret technique, Demon Claw Thrust. This is beautiful, dude. This reminds me of fucking Zoro, bro. Zoro fucking landed an attack flying by his opponent, bro. It's exactly like that, dude. Although it looks as if he only got a piece. So I don't know if Susanoo sidestepped it, so I guess it wasn't all that clean. Or if that was intentional and he just wanted to take a chunk out of Susanoo's side. But nevertheless, it lands, blood splatters all out, and Susanoo has to collect himself. The Shinshin Gumi go crazy, and the narrator says, thanks to the awakening of the sword demon, the arena transformed into a crucible of excitement. Okita's eyes are tracking Susanoo now, and that red fucking aura is still fucking flying out of his eyes. We get this amazing shot of Susanoo looking through his fingers, tracking Okita. He's got him in his sights now. The narrator says the sword god's left hand alone, quietly, held the sword demon captive, held Okita captive. He's got him in a sight like a fucking sniper right now. This is one of the coolest panels of Susanoo we've ever seen. He's got this crazy stance where he's cocked back with one eye through the middle of his hand, and he says ready to go as he launches this immense sword slash. Hilda, Go, Sasuke, all the crowd are astonished. They can't even muster a word. Finally, Sasuke says that's not good, and we see a picture of Okita noticing what's coming his way. Susanoo launched the attack in an epic panel where it's called Ame no Mageshi Reverse Heavenly Demon Mugen Ceaseless. As he strikes down, Okita thinks, holy shit, he's fast. It's too late for me to escape now. The divine blow could not be dodged. This is an epic panel, so Susanoo had gotten behind Okita after tracking his movements with his hand, and he actually got behind him and had him in his sights to finish the slash. At this moment, the narrator says, so Okita, would he only rely on luck to try to evade that blow? No. Kyoto during the Bakumatsu period, his face was rubbed by the god of death several times, bro. This is fucking badass. Nothing else was needed but experience. Okita ramped up his heart once more, pushed for more Onago, which is insane at this point. More Onago at the last second with everything he had, with two hands gripping his sword, met the sword slash in the fucking middle. And he parried it. He redirected the momentum from the side, so the attack went through the town. It cut down one of these fucking shops or whatever the hell they got in the city. And Okita immediately, as he's barely getting out of the way of the attack, uses the momentum, spins in the air, lands on his feet, faces down with Susanoo. Crowd is astonished. His eyes are starting to bleed at this point. Susanoo says, I am boiling here. I can't believe you managed to react to even Mugen. Amazing panel of the ambiance behind us with the darkness of the night, with Okita just staring down Susanoo, no words needed, but it looks as if he's tired now. That took a lot of effort out of him. He lets out a breath and says, I'm surprised you can release such a powerful attack from such a small accumulation of energy. Susanoo says, but the strength is reduced in exchange for that though. However, I will finish this with the next one. And he puts Okita back in his sight again, bro. This is a cool ass technique, man. I love it, and the stance is dope. Here we go. We are kicking right into Okita's backstory. We start off seeing Okita standing near a tree. Now these might be cherry blossoms, I'm not sure. He's standing next to this tree with a void in front of him. I still have not fulfilled my promise to Kondo-san. That's what he's thinking. We flash back now to when Okita was a kid. He's walking around these streets with Kondo, and it seems like he's troubled. He says, "I'm so sorry, Kondo-san. I messed up the training camp again. Whenever I turn into that thing, Onago, the demon child, I always lose myself. Before I knew it, I completely messed that guy up. I've also caused a lot of trouble for you, Kondo-san." We get a montage of Okita just destroying everybody in the dojo and Kondo having to apologize for things. Kondo walks over, pats his head and says, "Don't worry about that, Soji. That was the decision I made to myself when I took you under my wing. Even if that includes the demon child thing, I accept and take everything about you," with a smile on his face. Okita still looks sad and says, "I understand that this is not good, but in the end, I'm not able to stop. In the end, I'm just a monstrous murderer. I don't think I'll ever be able to become a noble samurai like you." We see that Kondo's expression turns somber. He says, "Good grief. Soji, do you know what the bu in Bushi means?" Bushi means samurai. Okita says, well, is it the power to kill enemies?" Kondo says, "Well, I mean, you're not entirely wrong, but what I mean is staking one's life on one's own beliefs. That person can die with a smile on their face. That is what a real samurai is." This resonates with Okita. He thinks die with a smile. He questions it. Kondo says, "That's right. Everything is fine. It's alright, Okita Tsuji. One day you will understand. Someday. That I am sure of." He puts Okita on his shoulders and the two continue to walk through the streets. Okita says, "Kondo-san, can someone like me, a monster, really become a samurai? Not a rampaging monster with killing power, but a true samurai who fights with conviction." And Kondo's like, "Why are you complaining and talking so much? At a time like this, all you should say is, 'I will do it.'" And the kid Okita Tsuji says, "Alright, right. I will become one," and they fist bump. It's a promise. We cut back to the arena. I promised. Heimdall screaming on the mic. The one who took control over the clash of swords was none other than Susanoo no Mikoto, as you see Okita laying in a heap in front of Susanoo after that huge attack from last chapter. Susanoo smirks and falls back. He lands on the ground and he says, "I'm boiling over here," seeming satisfied with what he had done. He believes that he has won the fight at this point. The crowd for the god side cheers loudly. The Shinshin Gumi, the humans, watch on the big screen as Okita lays, seemingly lifeless, on the ground. Kondo clutches his fist and screams out, "Tsuji!" And at that moment, Okita grabs his sword once more. Susanoo surprised. Tsuji says, "Kondo-san, not yet. I still have yet to fulfill my promise." He sits up, sticks his sword into the ground to pull himself back to his feet. Susanoo can't believe his eyes. Heimdall can't believe his. Whoa, no way. Even at this state, so close to death, he's still trying to stand up. The Shinshin Gumi can't believe it. They're like, "Are you for real? He can still do this? Okita Tsuji, what kind of a man are you?" And Kondo says, "Tsuji, he's at a loss for words." Okita says, "Until I give everything I have, I cannot die." We got back to a little bit further in his life, back into the flashback. 4th year of the KO period. The year was 1868. He's training with the sword, but you can see a lot of distress on his face. He says, I have to be useful to Kondo-san, to everyone." As he grew older, Okita Tsuji became the captain of the 1st unit of the Shinshin Gumi. He was praised as the strongest swordsman of the Bakumatsu. However, the Boshin War, which began in the 4th year of the KO era, amidst the final battles of the Shinshin Gumi, Kondo Isami and his comrades found themselves struggling. At the very moment when they needed his sword the most, the strongest of their faction, Okita Tsuji, was confined to a bed. We see him collapse. Blood spurts from his mouth. Struggles to hold onto his sword. This is all because of the fatal disease, tuberculosis, that plagued him. He thought to himself, "Everyone, I want to help everyone. I want to fight alongside you guys. I am not done yet. I have yet to use everything I have." Following the incident in 1864, Okita Tsuji of the Shinshin Gumi fell ill and was forced to leave the front lines. It is said that he quietly passed away on a tatami mat at the home of a gardener named Hyogoro, where he had been hiding to recover. All he wanted in those days, day after day, was to fight alongside his comrades. He believed the day would come. He continued to swing his sword, continued to train, but every day he trained, the sword seemed to get heavier and heavier. He screamed out. He couldn't believe it. Felt hopeless, useless. "Everyone's waiting for me," he thought, as he lay on the ground. At that point, it looks like he's plagued with a heart attack. He spits up blood. We get a close-up of his eye, and he sees his reflection staring back at him. But this reflection is the Onago. The Onago is the demon that resides within Okita, the most ferocious and strongest battle instinct which has dwelled within him since his birth. Onago says it's been a while, Suji. We get some awesome panels. As a price for his demonic strength, it has been continuously consuming his body. You've lost so much weight. It's almost time now. Almost time to die. Even after you fell ill, I was waiting for my chance. What a shame. His chance to go all out. Okita says, I am going to die, right, Onago-san? You see, I still haven't been able to fulfill the promise to Kondo-san. That's why. And he gets cut off by Onago. He was going to say, that's why I want to continue living, that's why I want to continue fighting. But Onago says, that's useless, Suji. Your body is falling apart. We won't be able to fight side by side again. Don't even speak on it anymore. Okita starts crying and says, not yet. But Onago dissolves away. I still want to help Kondo-san. Hijikata. Everyone from the Shinsengumi. Not yet. Not now. I still want to swing my sword even more with everyone. I have so much more to give. Please wait. I don't want to die yet. This is extremely sad. The panels are incredible. It looks like he's falling by that tree with the blossoms into the void. Tears in his eyes, falling away from everybody that he loves and cares for. You get an awesome shot of his palm reaching out for the Shinsengumi, and they can't hear him. They can't see him, and he fades away. Just a bit more, not yet, not yet. And it fades to black. We cut back to the battlefield now, with Okita standing in front of Susanoo, who's still sitting on the ground. He can't believe it. Heimdall says, I can't believe it. Okita says, I want to fight more. The near-dead Okita Tsuji, says Heimdall, stood up. The Shinsengumi erupts. He stood back up, he's back on his feet, hell yeah. What's that though? The color of Okita's eye is blue, so it's usually red. Now it's blue. His body is not the same as it was back then, says Okita. Now I can finally go all out. That is why Onago too should be completely fine this time. We then see Onago emerge next to Okita. Very similar to how the Valkyries usually emerge next to their fighter. It actually seems as if Onago might be taking the place of his Valkyrie as the demon, because we still have not got a Valkyrie this chapter, and it doesn't seem likely we're going to at this point. Onago says, even if we somehow manage to beat Susanoo, Tsuji, you will die. And Okita just smiles and says, I don't care. That's a samurai for you. Onago says, samurai. He starts laughing and says, that's good. I see. Me and Tsuji using everything we have for once. Alright then. Me and you, Tsuji. We will die together. In an amazing shot, Okita drops his cloak that was around his body. We get to see side by side Onago and Tsuji holding the swords, and the blue flames erupt out of Okita's eyes. You see aura going everywhere, and it actually erupts so far that it reaches the clouds, reaches into the sky. The most aura we've ever seen from Okita, and it is a new color, blue, representing the Shinsengumi. Now the thing about this is that it's super weird, like the damage that he took from that slash, because you would have thought that slash last chapter would have just cleaved him in half if it hit him this clean, but we don't really even get to see a scar, so this is kind of weird, not gonna lie. But it's still an awesome moment with Onago, as Okita says, everything I will give, everything I have. Him and Onago both scream that out at the same time. One of the Shinsengumi guys says, what in the world is this sword pressure? I can't see the bottom of it at all. Is this really Tsuji? Kondo starts bawling. He says, I've always believed when Okita Tsuji said that one day he would become a true samurai. So full circle moment from the backstory. Okita finally fulfills his promise to Kondo to be a true samurai by Kondo's definition, to stake one's life for one's beliefs, to fight with your life on the line with everything that you have. Amazing shot of Okita holding his katana. It says Demon Child Scatter, seems to be the name of the technique. Could be some translations with that. Okita says the captain of the first unit of the Shinsengumi will make his move. Absolute beast with the blood all over him, pointing the sword, full conviction, fully accepting that he will die at the end of this fight. But one detail that is pretty weird is that it looks like that second katana that was on his hip is just disappeared. So I don't know why it was even there. I guess it was just like an illustration choice, unless they were trying to insinuate that the second katana represented Onago potentially, because like Onago has his own sword, it seems like, when he's next to Okita. But obviously they just merge into one body. I guess we're supposed to suspend our disbelief here. I'm not really sure what the deal is with all this, but I figured I'd note it. Okita takes his stance, stares down Susanoo, who is befuddled by all this information he's taking in. He himself starts crying now and says, this is a reward. Descending from my home, all those days swinging my sword alone. He stands back up to his feet. You see the tears reaching the ground. All that has finally been rewarded. At this point, we get to see a shot of his family watching the fight. And it actually looks like his family is now somehow in the crowd. Like, beforehand, it looked like they were watching from home. So I went back and double checked for chapter 90, And I actually was wrong on that. It does look like they've been in the arena the whole time. I just missed it when I was reading that chapter, I guess, because it's so like in the corner that you can just see other stands, and it looks so similar to their throne room in their home world, and I got confused because they were watching it on the big screen. But the nuance of it was, you know, he had sacrificed everything for them, and now they finally get to see it. Now everybody gets to see why he made the sacrifice he did. The true essence of swordsmanship. He said he dreamed of someday using the swordsmanship that he had been honing for so long. We get shots of Hephaestus, we get shots of that other goddess that helped forge his sword, all the blacksmiths that work together. I am now convinced that my divine life was meant for this very moment. He takes his shoes off, which is interesting. What is he gonna do with that? Is that gonna be so he can get more force from the ground? We know that that's been key to his stance, his drawing force, planting his feet, but now with one of his feet half off, maybe he's doing this so he can get more grip. He walks toward Okita, again with tears in his eyes. Okita is now taken aback, and he says, "Okita Tsuji, thank you." And that is the chapter. We're following up right after last month where we saw the merger of Onago and Okita. Now Okita is reaching his true potential. He's got a blue aura around him, and he is finally able to give it his all after dying early to tuberculosis beforehand. The first initial panel is, of course, an epic stare down between Susanoo and Okita as Heimdall watches on from atop one of the buildings. He says Okita Tsuji, covered by a blue sword pressure, his aura, challenges the sword god Susanoo once more. The two face off, and we see a pan out shot of all the crowd watching on the big monitor, overseeing the city. Okita's aura is exploding like lightning around him. We get shots of Michelangelo, Bach, and another famous artist. Bach says so beautiful, and Michelangelo says his blue is so intense. Yeah, it's like his very life is burning. We see Okita still facing Susanoo say the words, "Thank you so much. I'm doing something so selfish and yet you are putting up with me." And at first you're like, is he talking to Susanoo? Who is he talking to? Somebody replies, "Your selfishness is my desire. Don't worry about anything. Just swing your sword to your heart's content." Is he talking to Onago, the demon we saw him having conversations with last month? No, he's actually talking to his Valkyrie. Lo and behold, finally, we have the Valkyrie reveal. Her name is Skalmood, or Skalmold. She is supporting Okita, so I guess he has both Onago and her. She says, "I am the Valkyrie who follows the swordsman's soul." So super interesting, it's going to tie into her ability. She says, "Right now, let's bring out everything you have." So clearly, his divine weapon is the sword, which obviously makes the most sense. It's what he's been clashing with Susanoo with. She's the sixth of the Valkyrie sisters, and we cut to Brunhilde and Gol. Gol says, "Okita and sister, they'll be fine, right?" She always says this. I don't know why she has to keep saying this. She's clearly seen a ton of her sisters die. I wouldn't even ask this question. Seeing those two together, I feel so uneasy. And I actually think that that specific line goes beyond surface level, given the ability that she wields and the way that he fights and the abilities he has, which you'll see more context in a few minutes. Hilda says, "As a Valkyrie, you can sense this too, right? Whether he wins or whether he loses, this will be his final battle as a swordsman." So is this alluding to the draw theory? If he can't fight after this, I don't know if he's gonna just be living, especially given that the doctors in Valhalla can basically repair anything. Like, we've seen some pretty crazy healing already, so this could be foreshadowing that he's going to die, win or lose, especially given what Onago said last chapter, where Onago is basically like, "Hey, you know, we're in too deep at this point. You know, you're gonna die at the end of this," is basically what he was implying. So very interesting how this goes. A draw is very possible. Gol says, "Final battle as a swordsman." Hilda says, "Right now, Okita Tsuji, having become completely one with Onago, he wields a power capable of consuming his own body. Naturally, Okita's body should have already been broken down a long time ago. It's unable to withstand that power." Gol says, "If that's the case, then why?" Hilda replies, "That is Skalmood's ability. The moments Okita Tsuji accumulated as a swordsman and the future moments he would have experienced as a swordsman had he not died by disease are all being concentrated into this very present. All of his potential is forcibly concentrated right now, right here, into this moment." She's drawing out all of his potential, says Gol. And Hilda says, "Yes. In other words, right now, Okita Tsuji is staking everything past, present, and future on this very fight. He attained the perfect body for a swordsman, and the sixth of the Valkyries, Skalmood, wields the perfect power for him. The power that dwells within her is the age of the sword." So people were saying they didn't want that Valkyrie to pull up because if he had a Valkyrie, it was going to probably be an ass pull. He already had Onago going for him, so you could have potentially wrote a situation where it's like, oh, well, it makes sense he could harm gods because he has demonic abilities. Obviously, I talked about in my spoiler video that for consistency in the series, I'm glad he has a Valkyrie, but I could see some of the fan base being upset if this is kind of the plot way he can stay alive if he was to win, because she's kind of counteracting the downside of Onago. He's basically getting the best of both worlds because he can wield Onago and then he has her basically protecting him. It's kind of similar to what Through did for Raiden, making it so he can use the power that his body couldn't withstand. Cool panels of them together, and we get some narration that Okita is staking every ounce of his swordsmanship in this battle. He's putting it all to good use. Okita says, "Here I go," and charges towards Susanoo, but this time he is so fast that Susanoo is surprised even after seeing all the speed he's displayed previously. This battle, which is already known for great action, is delivering yet another one of the greatest action scenes we've gotten in Record of Ragnarok so far, as Okita thrusts forward with a new attack called Demon Claw Thrust. Susanoo barely reacts at the last second, with his Godly Myriad technique having to go back to the Ironclad defense to even be able to survive. Reacts at the last second, but when he goes to block the attack, he tries to counter Okita, but he cuts air. It's almost as if he's cutting through water, as Okita is completely formless. He's gone. He's already a mirage in the face of Susanoo. We get to see Okita emerge right behind Susanoo with another strike that Susanoo barely sees at the last second and again reacts. He sends another strike, but again the same thing happens where he tries cutting through him, but he cuts through something akin to water. Okita lands. He stays on the attack. He thrusts once more at Susanoo with Oblique Dragon. Again, Susanoo's defense, the Godly Myriad, is holding firm enough at this point, but Susanoo cannot catch a break. Without a moment of hesitation, Okita's already launched Tiger's Tail, and he's once again appeared behind Susanoo. This time, Susanoo looked dead to rights. Out of his peripheral vision, he catches it at the last moment possible. He thinks to himself, what the hell is this combo? This is not even in the same realm from before. Whether I block or dodge him, another attack comes right after. I can't counterattack. I can't escape from this barrage. We get a panel that is like almost what we saw from Poseidon's 40-day flood against Sasuke. Not to that extent, but it is crazy the amount of after images that you see here from Okita, all raining down on Susanoo, who still remains able to react ever so slightly. All these different names chained together in one continuous combo. Susanoo isn't backing down though. He screams out, "Let's go," as he continues to block every single strike. Heimdall screams out. Okita is displaying ceaseless violence with a series of attacks that Susanoo, even with his impregnable technique, is barely enduring. It's too fast. I don't know what's going on anymore, says Heimdall. We cut to Zeus, Hermes, Ares, and Zeus is like, wow, those two right there are truly amazing. Hermes says that it seems that even Susanoo's perfect Godly Myriad is evolving in the battle. It's getting stronger and getting better out of necessity to keep up with Okita. Ares says, are you saying that Okita is surpassing even his own evolution? Yes, so Okita has essentially surpassed the original Godly Myriad. The Godly Myriad's improving, and Okita is still pushing Susanoo to the brink. He's getting past the evolution of Godly Myriad. Zeus gets so hyped that he buffs himself up. He says, good grief, that's impossible. These consecutive strikes and those movements, they far exceed the human limit. Awesome panel of Okita as we see all his muscles all tightening up as he continues to keep on with the barrage. The Shinchin Gumi members are watching and they're like, what the hell is that? Suji is so awesome and cool, but what secret techniques are these? Kondo says, I can't believe it. Each strike he lands a deadly blow from the Tenin Rishin Ryu style. It's essentially a sword designed for one-hit kills. That's the usual Shinchin Gumi style. But to continue to unleash that as a series of attacks is impossible in terms of body mechanics. When and where did Suji learn this? Matter of fact, when did he even think about something like this? Okita Suji's dreamlike series of techniques were unknown to even Kondo, who taught him everything. However, there was only one person who gazed upon that figure of Okita with a myriad of emotions that recognized it. His name was Ichimatsu, a child of the gardener Higoru. The gardener Higoru is the person that took Okita in when he was suffering from tuberculosis, when he was trying to recover to get back on the battlefield, but of course he could not. So this kid and Okita had some kind of friendship as Okita suffered. And this kid is crying in the crowd and he's holding onto these sheets of paper. He screams out, hang in there, Suji, don't lose. We get a small flashback that says even in his later years as his illness worsened and he was no longer able to wield a sword, couldn't pick it up, he never gave up on his swordsmanship and tirelessly on his hands and knees would come up with ideas, draw out the schematics, and try to improve his swordsmanship style with the hope that he would one day get to use these techniques. The kid told him to rest, but Okita says not yet. He coughs up blood as the kid pleads, that's enough already. If you don't rest, you'll really die, Suji. Okita replied, Ichimatsu, please find me more ink. I beg you. These techniques were the fruits of countless hours of suffering spent combing and refining over and over and over again. 80 techniques of the Tenin Rishin Ryu style on the battlefield, a completely new series of linked attacks, a martial art which was devised by Okita himself. So in the spoilers, they were kind of thinking that it was potentially this kid's drawings, but no, this was Okita coming up with the schemes to chain all these attacks together. So he's using styles that he's already learned. The only difference is he's finding a cohesive pattern to where he can chain them together without losing a step, without losing speed, without having to reset. He can just chain the attacks. It's almost akin to like what Tanjiro does with the 13th breathing style. It's like one continuous style, endless barrage of attacks back to back to back. Okita says, I will fight alongside Kondo-san and everyone else once more. The kid is crying now. He says, Suji. We get narration that says, born from the desperate flapping of imaginary wings, while he was confined to a sickbed, they were far from reality. These techniques, exceeding the limits of a human being, they would never be used. They couldn't. But for that very reason, Okita Suji's sword transcended human logic and soared into the heavens. This is fucking awesome, dude. We got this pan out shot of this flying over Okita's hut as he was dying. We cut back and it's more after images, all barraging Susanoo as Susanoo is clearly pressed. We got this amazing panel of Okita rising into the air with that damn eagle or falcon or bird that was flying over his cabin, almost as if it appears behind him. He's got these flapping wings, the wings of these techniques that exceed human limits, and he's fully achieved it. It is called Tenin Rishin Ryu, the kite that returns to the heavens. Amazing technique. It looks like he's like got aural wings behind him. He is truly transcendent. It brings Kondo to tears as he mentions the kite that returns to heavens. Empyrean. Ragnarok chapter 94. We're picking up right where we left off from 93 with Kondo crying, saying the kite that return to the heavens. Empyrean, that's Okita's new technique where he's got these aural wings. It truly looks like he's flying right here, bro. This is insane. And if you thought 93 was good, you're in for a fucking treat because this chapter is better in my opinion. So we start things off, like I said, with this clash with Okita coming down with those aural wings slamming down on Susanoo's guard. Kondo's in shock, so is the Shinsengumi as they question the word Empyrean. What's that? Kondo says the kite soars and returns to the skies. And you know what I just realized? I think a kite is actually a bird. Yeah, it's actually a type of bird. So that's what they meant. I didn't know what kind of bird it was in 93. Now I know. The kite soars and returns to the skies. It expresses the state of all things freely enjoying themselves, according to their natural instincts. Kondo continues and says, this is the Chinese poem that my foster father, the third headmaster of the Tenin Rishin Ryu style, used as the seal and inscription for the ultimate techniques of our school. Soji, have you finally reached the highest realm? The realm of that ultimate technique, a place where no one else has ever been. Panels look awesome. Okita is more confident now than ever before. You see him barrage at Susanoo again with all these after images. You see the names of these attacks flying out. Constant barrage of named attacks. And Susanoo is literally feeling the effects. He says, I can't even catch my breath. It's like being crushed by an avalanche. But this guy is so damn impressive that he is still, up to this point, not been hit by any of these fucking attacks. His godly mirror just continues to evolve and he keeps on going. He now is smiling. He says, Okita Soji, my man, I knew it. You are the greatest. Pretty high fucking praise from the sword god to be calling you the greatest, and I don't know what the context of him calling him the greatest is. Greatest what? Greatest swordsman? Greatest fighter? What is he talking about? Either way, it's high praise. Susanoo tries to counter at one point. Again, Okita dodges out of the way and Okita ends up behind him. He points the sword in this, like, he looks like a fucking turtle here, bro, for some reason to me, but his back is compressed down. He's got the sword inverted and he is prepared to strike him down with another powerful thrust. He says, you led me here to the peak, Susanoo. Thank you. One of the Shinsengumi says, here it comes, the 3-stage thrust. And somebody else says, no, it's not that. Kondo chimes in, he says, that's not the 3-stage thrust. And Okita flies forward like a fucking avalanche, as Susanoo was saying. Ichimaru, his boy, the kid from the last chapter, is screaming, go for it, Suji, go for it. The strike unleashed at the end of the continuous attacks transcended the speed of gods. Insane statement. Insane statement. And that's not even the end of it. Transcended the speed of the gods and transcended humanity itself and pierced the boundary between gods and humans. It's called Demon Claw 3-stage thrust. As we get this montage of the first one coming in, where it looks like Susanoo is able to react, he parries it with awesome panels. Like, these are some of the coolest panels, bro. Okita's face looks awesome. He's so determined. And actually, it looks like he may have been nicked by Susanoo here on the head, where a scratch hit him, which is super impressive for Susanoo if that happened just recently. I'd have to go back and check. That's number one. Susanoo parries it. The second one comes in. You could see the after image fade out of Susanoo's view, and he ends up again behind Susanoo. Susanoo was able to parry that attack enough, the second one, but the third thrust, Susanoo looked back, he realized he was behind him, but it was too fucking late this time. Okita crouched down with an aura of the kite, blitzed forward where you see Onega's face with a demonic smile, you see Okita's face on the other side, and they are coming with full force for the Demon Claw 3-stage thrust. So it's the 3-stage thrust that he's been using, now amplified Demon Claw. Demon timing, let's go. The crazy thing about this shit is that fucking, even though I say it's too late for Susanoo here, he actually still reacts to the attack. That's how crazy Susanoo is. His sword blocks it. The problem is, like, when Okita launches, I mean, this is like something that's like, I mean, I'm sure he's moving faster, but that looks like what happens when somebody breaks the sound barrier. He breaks Susanoo's sword. So we were talking about this in the spoilers, because obviously something that's coming later is the people that watch the spoiler video know. But yes, Susanoo literally has his divine weapon broken, which somebody commented that this is the first time he thinks like a divine weapon's being broken. It's not the first time. We saw Hades' Biden get broke. We saw Poseidon's Trident get broke. We've seen Buddha's staff get broke. Anyway, the fact that Susanoo reacted to this in this kind of way is still insane, but the sword broke. Okita's force literally broke Ame no Murakumo. To the very end, Susanoo was trying to parry off the attack and try to push back, but it did not work and the thrust got through. For the first time in this whole fucking montage of fights where they've elevated their power levels, Okita lands something clean. The crowd is stunned, literally. Susanoo screamed out, Musashi, Sasuke, Zeus, Ares, Hermes, Heimdall, all astonished as Heimdall says, the sword demon's Isen pierced right through the sacred treasure and the god. Susanoo takes massive amounts of damage. Eyes go white. Huge hole in the side of his torso. Spits out a ton of blood. Shinsengumi is going wild right now. Ichimaru is elated. Go and Hilda are celebrating. The human blacksmiths that worked on Susanoo's sword can't fathom that the sword would be shattered like that. The only humans perhaps that are rooting against Okita. It gets to the point where Tsukiyomi, Amaterasu, and Izanagi, Susanoo's family, are genuinely worried for Susanoo. Izanagi stands from his seat. First time he's showing any emotion like this, first time any of these guys are. He doesn't say one word. The story is told by his facial expression, standing up as the head of the pantheon, watching his son potentially die. Tsukiyomi says this has to be a lie. Amaterasu says Sano and trails off. While everyone in the arena was certain of Tsuji's victory, there was one human who felt a sense of unease. It was none other than Okita Tsuji himself. After the thrust, he turned around and looked as if he had seen a ghost. Okita's eyes just remind me of like a puma, bro. But anyway, as if he had seen a ghost, Susanoo still remained standing. Holding just the hilt of his sword, his determination had not faltered. He raises his palm up to his face and says, this is a real battle. This is the first real battle that he can have. We see a small flashback of Susanoo staring into what looks to be a mirror, but it's almost like a portal where he could see and watch, and this reveals that he was stalking basically and watching and observing Okita as he was drawing these techniques out. This Empyrean technique. Jacked to the gills. Even without being able to wield a sword, he never gave up on the sword. That was something that he observed from Okita. And it is now something that, because of that experience and because of knowing Okita the way he does and seeing it in action now, seeing the dividends that it paid, it has actually influenced him. Susanoo has always been a god that was willing to learn from humans, and now it is going to pay off. While looking at his hands, he says this is swordsmanship. He drops the hilt that's broken, the hilt of his broken sword, raises his two hands to the sky and says, thank you, Okita. Thanks to you, finally, I was able to reach it. The crowd doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. What's that? Is that a surrendering pose? No, I don't feel any weakness from it. Indeed, how divine. It's as if he's praying, but he ain't praying. He brings his hands together in the exact positioning he would as if he was wielding a sword. The sword god raised both fists, palms together towards the sky, and gently grasped the hilt of his sacred treasure, the sword he thought he had lost. We don't see the hilt though. There's no hilt actually physically in his hand, yet he is still grasping on that hilt as if it is still existing. Slowly, as usual, he assumed a formal stance. Okita at this point is completely giving him his undivided attention. in his own stance. And then, as if in a child's play, Susanoo swung down an invisible sword. Okita clearly was caught by surprise by this, clearly had no idea what to fucking expect. He was worried, but he didn't know what the hell he was doing. Legitimately, he had no idea what the ramifications would be. By the one who continued to love the sword, a miracle was accomplished. The sword strike connected. The Shinsengumi, the humans, the gods, even Sasaki are all taken aback. Okita's reactions are unnatural. We see these impact frames and these weird reverberations that result in this line streaking down Okita's arm and streaking down his leg. It doesn't look as if they've been cut or pierced, but there is damage done. Okita's eyes tell the whole story here. He is shocked. He has no idea what's happening. He says, "What the? My left arm and my left leg were cut." No, their insides were cut, and we get an X-ray vision shot that Okita's left arm, the bone was cut clean in half, and his left leg, his upper leg, like where his quad is, that bone was cut clean. Susanoo literally used an invisible sword and just cut 2 of Okita's bones down, and this is gonna severely limit Okita's movement. But I don't know. We'll see, because we would have thought Susanoo potentially could have been limited from his foot injury. So we'll see what Okita's gonna do. If those wings from the fucking aura thing are gonna affect something, I don't know. Susanoo says, "At last I've reached it, the peak of my swordsmanship. Unparalleled, thoughtless, and without adornment. This is simply Musoken, the unornamented sword," with an amazing panel, a sinister aura around Susanoo as he wields his invisible blade, the peak of his swordsmanship to date, as Okita stares on in absolute disbelief. Record of Ragnarok chapter 95, and this is it. This is the conclusion of round 10. We will have a winner by the end. There is a dream yet to be fulfilled for those who have mastered martial arts. The peak of archery, in which there's no need to shoot with an arrow. The peak of fists, in which there's no need to strike with your fists. And then there's the peak of the sword, in which there's no need to use a sword to cut. As this is being narrated, we see this image of 3 martial art masters. We don't get any names for these guys, which is insanely weird, especially with what's coming, but it all leads up to being a master with the sword without having to cut. To kill without any weapons, without ornament, is that dream really out of reach? And we see this landscape with this giant boulder and this old man practicing his invisible sword. The narrator answers and says no. Masters and experts who reached the peak of that realm did exist. We see the old man strike down once more with his invisible sword, and a butterfly lands on the boulder. When the butterfly lands, it splits clean in 2. This is very similar to what happens in Demon Slayer when Tanjiro was training early in the series. However, without exceptions, those who reached said peak all died at the moment they came to this realization. So basically what they're doing here is they're setting up that reaching this level of power, reaching this level of mastery is something that literally rips your body apart, and any human cannot live to tell the tale. You see that this guy's body starts attacking him, his heart gives out completely, it explodes, and he collapses. At the same moment they reach that peak, that technique, that magnificent feat disappeared like dew, because they exceeded the limits of humanity and consequently reaching the realm of the gods. What I find interesting about this is that, well, if there were swordsmen and masters like this, where are they at in the tournament? Because we haven't seen anybody that had this mastery level as a human, and theoretically speaking, even if they died and they reached this level, they got a Valkyrie to help them, they should be able to use this in battle. So it's interesting. I wish we would have got a name for some of these guys, but they might just be generic. The important thing is that as this last guy was practicing his boulder strike, Susanoo was watching in his bird form. He was observing him, so he knew this was something that was attainable eventually. Heimdall says, the sword god's invisible sword Musoken destroyed the left side of Okita's body. Awesome shot of Okita, awesome shot of the arena, and perhaps the best panel of Susanoo ever within the series. This is peak, and the art for this chapter is amazing, and it's actually unbelievable for the Apocalypse of the Gods chapter as well. I can't wait to cover that next video. Susanoo starts walking toward Okita, who's crumpled down onto the ground. You start to see that he's feeling some of the effects. It looks like his blood vessels are pulsating. He says, so this is the unornamented sword Musoken. That's good. I am only feeling pain. Okita rises back to his feet and starts laughing. He says, Musoken, truth be told, I'm impressed. Just when I thought I surpassed you for good, you went and surpassed me again. Be for real right now. Are you having as much fun as me? Susanoo smiles back at him and says, absolutely. Susanoo goes on to say, I really wish I could fight forever. However,
If I continue to swing this guy Musoken, it seems very likely my very life and soul will shatter under it. His demeanor then changes to become super serious. He says, so I won't be able to do that. Let's end this. Amazing shots of Okita having to use his sword as a cane, Susanoo getting serious, loading back his Musoken, and Okita finally getting up, picking up his sword once more and pointing it toward his opponent. We see what looks like Susanoo pulling in the air into one point in his hands, his Musoken. Eri says, that technique, what the hell is that? It seems like Okita was damaged, but Susanoo, he just swung his arms. He doesn't have a sword. Hermes says, I don't understand the logic behind that technique, but like Heimdall said, he's swinging a sword of nothingness, a sword that can't be seen. It seems like Okita's left half was destroyed internally. It's a complete Dureneg. How can a technique so absurd and full of nonsense exist? Zeus then chimes in and says, that's something that transcends the realm of reason. It can't be measured. Insane statement. There's only one thing that's certain. Susanoo finally arrived there. After countless years foolishly swinging his sword over and over, he finally arrived there. The pinnacle of the sword. That's truly the realm of the supreme god. It's interesting to note that Sasuke doesn't get any dialogue this chapter, and I really think that this kind of is a missed opportunity because I would have liked to see his reaction and analysis of the invisible sword, especially given that we had that whole flashback kind of thing with the old master. So I'd like to see if Sasuke has any knowledge of this technique. Maybe we'll get that next chapter when there's aftermath. We cut back to the face-off. Okita's aura is encapsulating him, and the Shinsengumi are watching on. Hisuke says, Okita-san, he's exhausted, he can barely stand. Suji. The rest of them remain in silence. Hisuke then screams out, it's useless. Even for a guy like Okita, it's beyond pointless. There's no way he can move right now. Kondo says, Hisuke, pay attention. He replies with, what is there to watch? This is too much. He is now inconsolable. He is bawling, sobbing, crying dramatically. How will he fight like that? It's pointless. He's done. Kondo grabs him by his shoulders with a smile on his face and says, this is the wish Suji could never fulfill on Earth. A battle where he can give everything as a samurai. You owe it to him to watch. Until the very end, we will watch everything. Amazing stare down shot of Susanoo and Okita preparing for the final clash. Susanoo says, I'm really happy that I was able to fight you. Okita says, I can say the same thing, Susanoo-san. All the gods in the arena are silent. Anubis is watching very excitedly. Musashi and Kojiro watch in amazement. And Amaterasu says, go for it, Susanoo, in this awesome collage of everybody hanging in the balance of what's to come. No more words need to be said. The stance taken by the sword god was the one-hit kill, Saijoden top row. And one really cool detail on this page is that obviously we saw Susanoo lost half of his foot from Okita. He is digging in the nubs of his toes into the dirt so he gets that maximum power. I really like that detail because it was emphasized how heavily he needed to use his legs for power to generate it, and his feet were digging into the ground. So now instead of being able to curl his toes into it, he is now just like spearing his foot into the ground, which I like that detail. Okita prepares himself and gets prepared to try to launch forward at Susanoo as well. Susanoo uncorks the unornamented sword, Musoken, with an amazing slash. And the backdrop shot here is breathtaking, honestly, because it looks like there's just space behind Susanoo. It looks like there's just nothingness. This encapsulates a blade of nothingness so well. And Okita, as he prepares for the attack, he's going for his thrust attack, but it's too late. The slash lands extremely clean on Okita. He immediately spits up a ton of blood. I have no idea how he survives this attack and what this actually cut, because this looks like it's striking down vitals. This looks like it could have hit his heart. We know this is a Dureneg attack. Definitely goes through his shoulder, so that whole left side cannot be moved, and it should strike down through his spine here. In an epic shot, we see Susanoo falling forward into his stance with his eyes white and his blood vessels pulsating through his face, and Okita falling forward, wide-eyed, barely hanging on to consciousness, as it looks like he's defeated. In that moment, Okita almost concedes defeat. He says, well, that god is really strong. I can no longer move my body. I gave everything I had. I can finally die happy as a samurai. But at the last moment, right before landing on the ground, he hears his crew, the Shinsengumi, scream his name, Suji. In an epic moment, he slams his foot into the ground of his right side, the one side he could actually move. His eye gets extremely wide, the aura encapsulates his body again. He pulls back his sword once more, clenches down with his teeth, blood flies from his mouth. He has a montage moment where he's remembering all the things that he did, his life when he could not move, when he was plagued with tuberculosis, drawing up the techniques. And he says, I may not be able to move, but I can still fly. And here we see that same thing we saw last chapter where the wings of like his aura come out and it's almost like he takes the appearance of the kite. Here though, the detail is because the left side of his body is completely destroyed, he only has one wing. He's the one-winged angel. He leaps into the air off of one foot, thinking to himself, this right here is my purpose. The final blow of the swordsman Okita Tsuji, looking like an absolute demon flying through the air. The heavenly demon, as Susanoo watches on thinking, wow, Okita, you can still wield your sword, impressive. However, you will no longer reach me. As he loads back his own attack once more. Kondo's sweating, Okita's locked in. Susanoo is prepared to strike the killing blow. This is the end. Both characters' aura is fully covering up the panels, but it is too late for Susanoo, as he was a second late because of course this takes such a toll on his body. He thought he had just killed Okita with the last slash. When Okita reaffirmed himself, slammed his foot to the ground and jumped into the air, Susanoo had a couple seconds of delay before he could lift his own two hands and prepare to strike down. In this moment, as Okita soars through the air, he uses Tensho, flight to the heavens, 3-stage thrust. As Susanoo seems shocked by the speed, Okita lands his 3-stage thrust. 3 massive holes ravage the sword god's body, and when the final one lands, Okita face plants into the dirt, completely exhausted. Susanoo's face is surprised, but he's spitting up blood. His hands are still above his head, and as he has the helpless Okita in front of him, Heimdall, Zeus, Kojiro, all the people watching can't believe what they've just witnessed. Heimdall screams out, Okita's sword strike flew. Susanoo cracks a smile as we see the effects, blood all over, the cracks into his skin. You couldn't fly, yet you continued to soar. To think that you would be able to release that at this very moment with a body like that, I expected nothing less from you. Okita Tsuji, the man I admire most. Tsukiyomi, Susanoo's brother, screams out, Susanoo, win this. You can do it right now. Because Okita's obviously incapacitated on the ground, Susanoo only has to strike down his hands. If his hands go forward, he's won the fight. Okita looks up, seemingly accepting this. But then the moment of realization, Susanoo's arms start to crack. His eyes go wide, and he looks up toward the sky and says, I see. I can no longer swing my sword. That's a bit lonely. The 3-stage thrust attack was enough to kill Susanoo before he could unleash his final slash, which would have killed Okita. That slight moment of hesitation won Okita this match. We see Tsukiyomi, Amaterasu, and Izanagi immediately know what's happening. Izanagi stands up. He looks angry. He doesn't say a word, but we don't need words to know what they're feeling in this moment. After Susanoo was banished from their realm, it's very unlikely they had any contact with him from then to now. And after this, they're never going to get the chance to reconcile or have their words. Susanoo closes his eyes with a smile on his face as he turns into the green crystals, cracking into the dust. As this takes place, we get a super emotional panel of Okita looking up at him, crying, saying, Susanoo, Susanoo-san, thank you so much. As he falls out of consciousness, face in the dirt, we get this amazing shot of the arena behind Okita, the crystals going up into the sky, and the sword, Ame no Murakumo, broken. Heimdall announces the winner of the 10th round of Ragnarok, the last battle between gods and humans, as humanity's representative Okita Tsuji. He's officially won. Susanoo no Mikoto versus Okita Tsuji, match time 11 minutes and 25 seconds, finishing move, Tensho 3-stage thrust, Sandenzuki, winner, Okita Tsuji.